Hi, good morning, everyone. Hi, good morning,
Morning.
David. Good
Hi.
morning, Cynthia.
How's everybody today?
I am doing pretty good. How's everybody else?
I'm
Good.
good. Good. Haven't been outside yet, but
And let's see, we're getting a lot of people coming into the waiting room, so I'm just going to keep um, an eye on that and letting everyone in. And some people have been asking in the chat, can you have your camera on? Yes, you can turn your camera on if you want to. Everyone can be visible and everyone can have on their audio. Once everybody starts speaking, you may want to turn off your camera, turn off your audio if you're concerned about disruptive noises or anything like that. Um, I am Amanda. We're a little early, so I don't want to get into too much of a spiel and then repeat myself, but I'm hosting today. I've been a screener this year for the Big Apple Film Festival, which was a hard job because I can't tell you how many good films I saw. And it was difficult. I know I was only supposed to recommend a few, and I wanted to recommend almost everything. And I'm also an indie filmmaker, and I'm really excited about our group today. I think we have a pretty full house. So I'm going to be limiting everybody a little bit time-wise. And I hate interrupting people. So I'm going to ask everyone to keep an eye on your own time and be mindful that we have just incredible guests here today, and we want to give them a lot of space to give you feedback and advice. So try to think like of the, whatever 7 minutes or so you may have, you want to leave at least half of that, if not a little more, for the guests to share their feedback and their advice and their thoughts about your project. And while I was kind of prepping for this, I was watching some of the older videos from past events like this, and I noticed that people spent sometimes a lot of time listing all their festivals and awards, which is awesome. But I would just say your projects won a lot of awards and like name the top, maybe one or two, and then dig into like the heart of your project and anything specifically that you would find from our guests that would be really helpful feedback wise on honing the project or advice wise and getting it out there. We have a pretty hard hitting panel with us today. I hope we're all here because we're at 8:01. So I'm going to start by asking our industry guests to say hi, say their name, talk a little bit about what you do, and anything that you're really passionate about, like excited about working on right now that you'd like to share with us. So I don't know, everyone's Zoom displays are so different with how they come up. So I'm going to call on people in the order I see, but it may not be the order you see. But first for me, I see David. So David, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm David Matthews, and I'm a writer, producer, director. I've done a number of feature films, worked in television for years in both sitcoms and soaps.
Mm.
And right now I'm working on a documentary. It kind of fell into my lap, and I got drafted to do this thing, but it's become kind of a passion project for me.
Ooh,
So that's kind of what's taking up my time right at the moment.
that is awesome. Can you tell us just a teeny bit about what it's about?
Sure. Back in the back 50 years ago, in the late 60s, the federal government decided to give out some grants for the arts, and these were given to public school systems across the country. Um, there was a program in Dayton, Ohio, called the Living Arts Center, which took advantage of this, and we are doing a documentary on this program. Dealing with celebrating the program itself and other programs like it, and also encouraging similar projects like this today. Because certainly
Oh,
now we can use more money in the arts uh, for early arts education for children, and this program dealt with kids from 10 years old till seniors in high school.
wow. That's really inspiring. That's really cool. I was really curious when I saw your bio and it said you're working on a doc and it's kind of like your first thing in the doc space, what it was that grabbed you into that space. That sounds like an awesome project.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And then for me, next up for our industry guests, I see, are you Michael or Mike? What do you like to be?
Excuse me, either is fine, but Michael is probably what it's listed as.
Yeah, okay. All right. So Michael, you want to tell us a bit about you and what you're working on right now that's really exciting?
Sure. I'm a screenwriter director. I've been working in the industry since the late 90s. I directed a film for the Stars Channel in 2009, and I'm currently belatedly working on the follow-up, which is a high school. It's a very micro genre. It's a sci-fi comedy. I tell people it's where Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Election, the Venn diagram overlaps. So that's the kind of tone I'm going for, is a satirical high school. So the point is, it's a very contained, small film that I can shoot in. That's the gold prize right now, is to make it easy to make. Not that there's such a thing as an easy film. We all know that. Yeah. But that's really exciting. Taking up a lot of my creative time, joyfully taking up a lot of my creative time. And I just wrote a script that was shot of an R.L. Stine book, which is called Zombie Town. It's got Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd in it, and hopefully that'll be out next year sometime soon on, I believe, Hulu is where it's going to go. So that's pretty cool. So hi.
That's awesome. That sounds, I love Election. Honestly, I've rewatched it an embarrassing number of times.
I love when people recognize my 25-year-old counts.
Well, welcome, Mike. And then next
Thanks.
up for me of the industry guests, I see Steve. Are you Steve or Steven?
No, I'm just Steve.
Steve, awesome.
Hi.
I love it, Steve. Hey.
Hi, yeah, I'm Steve Douglas Craig. Yeah, I'm a graduate of the American Film Institute, where I did my master's in screenwriting there a number of years ago now. After that, I've spent the last 14 years as a creative executive and story editor at Sony Pictures Entertainment, where I worked in worldwide acquisitions for 8 years. Helped shepherd in films like, Arrival and the Insidious franchise. Last 4 years, I've been working at one of the Sony labels, Screen Gems, where I was a creative executive and senior story editor. As well as a screenwriter, I did a couple of seasons of freelance staff writing for a show called Hawaii Five-0 on CBS. Currently, though, I left Sony and Screen Gems, and I have 2 business and producing partners, and we are currently negotiating to be the operating partners of a $100 million media fund, which will run out of the East Coast, hopefully. I don't know yet. So we're pretty close to that at this stage. That felt like the right time for me to jump out of the studio and help people who need help.
That's
awesome.
That's really interesting. I at Produced By this year, I saw a great talk by Dan Lin, and he was talking about when he left the studio system, and he said people warned him he was going from being a house cat and an indoor cat to an outdoor cat. And that really made me laugh. But he said how much, in the beginning it was hard. He had a studio car, he had studio health insurance, and suddenly he felt like a babe in the woods. But of course, as we all know, he's been thriving since. So I can't wait to see all the cool stuff you're going to do.
Yeah, it feels right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And our very last but not least guest, Paul. Hey, down there, you're the last person for me on my screen. Do you want to join us and tell us a bit about you and exciting stuff that you're working on right now?
Absolutely. My name is Paul Weitzman. I'm a literary agent. I've been an agent for the last 25 plus years. I was running the literary department of Abrams Artist Agency with my partner, Brad Rosenfeld, when we broke off during the ATA madness to form Creative Entertainment. So for the last 3 years, we've been on our own, thriving, working in television and feature films. Gosh, I don't think it'd be fair to my clients to list out particular. I think there might be some jealousy there, but we have had a lot of success in television, sold a lot of pilots this year, have a number of feature films in pre-production right now, which is fantastic. But I mean, my main focus is in kind of broad comedies, dark comedies, thrillers, horror. That's kind of my thing.
Interesting. And it might be useful for some of our attendees here who are kind of interested in the TV space. Of the pilots you've sold this year, what do you feel like is feeling really buzzy and really compelling in the marketplace right now?
Boy, I mean, it's so early to tell right now. I mean, everyone's just in the script phase.
Yes.
I mean, and every particular network has their own mandates. So I can't say exactly, what's very buzzy. We've got auspices attached to things that are meaningful, which is always
Yes.
important. So some of those projects are a little bit more buzzworthy.
Yeah.
Not to kind of discuss those particulars, but there's a good number of them this year, probably more than ever before in my career,
Oh,
that are in place. So have a chance to go to pilot and go to series.
that's a really cool news. That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we're going to go through again, as I see it on my screen, at all of our wonderful attendees here. And, everyone won't have a ton of time, so maybe think like you want to spend 2 to 3 minutes describing your project in the way that you can. And if you want to work into that, anything about it that you feel like, oh, this is the sticking point, or I keep bumping against this, or this is the thing, if I had a genie in a bottle and I could say, can I just ask you this question? Can I just get this clarity? Ask that. And then, we'll try to give as much time as we can. Again, like maybe 3 minutes or so, for the industry guests to weigh in and see if they have feedback on what sounds most exciting about it, what seems problematic, or any advice for that like thorny thing that you're getting a little bit stuck on. So for me, the first person I see is Cynthia. So if you want to jump in, Cynthia, tell us a bit about what you've been working on, and any feedback or advice or anything that you would find particularly meaningful from this really just incredible panel we have here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's nice to meet all of you. I actually heard your session yesterday, Steve, at the summit. Was super helpful. Appreciate that, the hearing more about the business side of things. So I'm a writer, director, and a producer. I'm based in New York. I graduated from Columbia with an MFA in screenwriting, so also studied screenwriting. And I didn't actually direct anything while I was in film school. So when I came out, I immediately did a micro budget with a classmate that went to Sundance Midnight. And it was a kind of zany comedy. We made it, like by any means necessary, really hard work. But I learned enough to put together my own first directing project, which ended up being a feature, a micro budget feature. And I know, I learned how to put together a project. And so I tackled my next project. I started just before the pandemic. And I decided I really loved the work of directors like Eliza Hittman and Deborah Granick, Andrea Arnold, that work in a kind of doc fiction hybrid vein. And so I wanted to do a coming of age story about a girl, and I ended up setting it in the world of skateboarding in Southern California and San Diego. So I went out there and researched that world and met a bunch of people, and then basically wrote roles for real people to play a version of themselves in the film. But I did cast the lead as a professional actress. And I wrapped like mid this year, and I'm in post now. And the movie it's unusual. It's not like a typical indie in some ways, but in others it is, because it's very low budget. It's well under $1 million. And people would ask me like, okay, what's your goal with this film, which is called Back Disaster Smith, which is the name of a tricky maneuver in transition skating. And my goal was, okay, I'm going to finish the film. I'm going to learn how to make movies in this way, this kind of very specific way, which is super indie, and get it into the best festival I can. And I think now that I'm in post, I'm actually backing up and saying, actually, I want the movie to reach a wide audience, and I need to understand the business a little bit more to do that, like how to sort of position it in the world, and like not just kind of do a Hail Mary to get into Sundance, or Tribeca and hope for the best, but to actually kind of be a little bit more proactive in this phase while the movie is still, it's not locked. I was just out in San Diego 2 weeks ago shooting more material. Because I'm working with non-professionals, I can continue to build out the world and the film in different ways than it was scripted, because it was very scripted. But it's a kind of like achingly beautiful story about a girl that goes through a big emotional crisis and ends up bonding with her mother's boyfriend, who kind of takes over custody after she falls apart. And so really at the heart of it is this story about male caretaking of a child, which I think is really something I don't see a lot in film, in a way that isn't, a little bit, let's just say, like cliche. So yeah, that's kind of the themes of the movie, basics of how I put it together. And I'm just kind of looking for, what you think, like if, hearing the story, like what I should, like if there are advisors out there or guidance that I could turn to kind of figure out how best to, put this out there before I take that first step of finishing the film and submitting it.
So do any of our industry guests feel like you have any sort of advice on next steps for Cynthia in terms of kind of thinking about how to open this up to a bigger audience, or what she should do next?
I might jump in for a moment, Cynthia.
Great.
I always, most people disagree with me on this, so let me say that from the top. I always wonder about the film festival route in terms of being the best venue for independent filmmakers. I know it's what everybody does. Everyone makes their films and they enter it in the most prestigious festivals, which makes sense because there are hundreds of festivals around the country, and many of them won't accomplish what you want them to, which is you want to get somebody in the audience who's a distributor and wants to pick up the film and pay you for it and have a happily ever after for your film. And that happens for a handful of films throughout the year. But it seems to me more of a crapshoot than other things. There are people that you can reach out to. In some cases, there are people that can hook you up with smaller distributors that can still get your film out there, put some money behind the promotion, and get you seen, certainly on streaming services. If you're looking for theatrical release, that's a little more difficult and will require more money for you to put up, just simply because there are lots of additional expenses. But I guess what I would suggest is, if you're interested in pursuing alternative routes to film festivals that wouldn't necessarily preclude you from going to the festivals, I would have a couple suggestions of places you could go, and I could send you some details if you need them.
That'd be great.
Because maybe that would help you in your on your path.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, can I just add, that makes total sense what David was saying, but I mean, from my experience, I've also noticed that overexposing a independent film to too many festivals could be somewhat detrimental as well. So I'd be a little bit limiting on the number of festivals that you're going to enter into, because distributors sometimes will balk when they find out that your film has been everywhere already. So just add that.
Yeah, thank you for that, David and Paul, because I feel like, as filmmakers, we often hear the opposite. Everyone's like, be everywhere all at once, throw everything at the wall. And I think it's very confusing if what you ultimately want is to get off the festival circuit. And as Cynthia is saying, get a wider distribution. You may actually hurt your film through the process, but that's kind of what everyone traditionally tells us to do. So I think that's really great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I also agree with Paul. I think, it's like when you have relationships, with studios or networks or agencies, you don't want to be sending a new script from a writer to 50 people. You want to be very targeted about where you're going to send your film. I think the festival route is still a good one. But at the same time, you have to be very targeted on who's picking up movies like yours. It sounds like a female kind of Lords of Dogtown type of thing, where, one of the suggestions I have, and I experienced this very early on, only with a couple of producers in my 14 years, to be honest with you, but very smart thinking about, with something this size, is it going to be a theatrical movie? No, I don't think so. Not in this market right now. You can forget that. If it happens, nice accident, but I don't think so. Not with the elements that you've got attached to it. But there's a lot of content buyers out there right now that are streaming services, and it's doing a research on what your movie is like. Who is picking up your movie? Who's producing movies like yours? Who's distributing movies? And one of the things that I experienced early on in acquisitions, where we package films and we buy certain films in certain stages of development and production based on the elements that are attached to those. But, people are always wanting to get a producer or a distributor or a manager or an agent on the phone. And to be honest, they just, no offense, Paul, they don't care. They've got enough to do, right? There's a lot, they're very busy people. You should be looking to empower their assistants. So look at who's making your movie, right? Because the assistants and the coordinators, who probably work with Paul, they're the next agents, they're the next managers. They're hungry and they have more to gain from bringing good material to their boss, right? So people make the mistake of trying to get Paul on the phone all the time, and he's busy enough. But his assistant and coordinators are people who are out there looking at the smaller festivals, who are taking calls from people saying, hey, listen, I've got this new film. Would you watch it? Can you watch it and tell me what you think? I think that's always a good route. I experienced that a couple of times. And it was great because it got them on our radar. It got them on my radar. And I still have a relationship with one of them. So that's something to consider as well.
I don't interrupt you, but I couldn't agree with you more. I've mentioned that before the other day on a kind of individual kind of Q&A session. And what you're saying makes total sense. And I suggested that as well. Take advantage of those people, those lower level people, because those higher level people are not quite as hungry. They've already they've been there. They're looking for the package. They're not really as hungry as those people kind of coming up and looking to make their mark. So I totally agree with what you're saying. It makes perfect sense.
I guess I wanted to add just one quick thing that it's not, I downplay it because I don't think it's that important in terms of the story, but the skaters that I did cast as the friends in the movie are Olympic level. They're the two of the only women that actually went to Tokyo, and they're contenders for Paris in 2024. And I turned them into actors, and I actually turned in a pretty nice performance. And then there are a bunch of other kind of skaters / celebrity, have tons of followers. And that's a piece of it that I just don't know if that can be leveraged into any kind of bigger audience,
It can. And I think, look, here's the thing. Recently, and I know it's Paramount, but the movie Smile and what they did with that marketing campaign was incredible. Where it's a $17 million budget that has made just over $200 million worldwide in the box office right now. And it's not a completely new concept. It's a little bit of a twist on the concept, but their marketing campaign was very strategic. And I think, you can do the same with that skater community. A lot of these successful movies are on word of mouth. Word of mouth and social media are very powerful vehicles today, to the point where studios are developing whole departments around those and how to leverage them properly. So even as a producer of the movie, you should be thinking a marketing campaign as well. And how do I get that and leverage those relationships? Because that community of skaters, if the movie gets out, that word of mouth is going to help you a great deal on who hears about your film and who doesn't. So I think that is something you can definitely leverage.
Okay. Thank you for that, Steve.
Thank you, guys.
These are some great observations that I hope will be useful for anyone on the panel who's a filmmaker and kind of thinking about where they want to do with their film next and next steps. And I'm supposed to kind of be the bad cop here and keep everyone on time, which I'm terrible with because I hate interrupting people. But I'm just going to remind everyone, try to give us like a sense of your project in like a couple minutes and weave in your questions or problems or things you're stuck on, like the thorny things, feedback you really need, problems that you're facing, you don't know what the solution is. And then we'll try to open it up pretty quick because we have multiple panelists to their thoughts. And I don't want to stiff the people who are on my end, like Eric for me is the last guest, and give him like a minute. So I'm going to try to keep everybody moving along. For me next, I see Molly. So Molly, do you want to tell us a bit about what you're working on and the kinds of questions or feedback or advice that you would find really helpful right now?
Hi, my name is Molly, and I'm not sure, Paul, if you remember me, but I did ask you some questions about my short script. My short
Hold on, Molly, are you the person I'm thinking you are?
Yeah,
Oh.
my short script is selected as the finalist, and I did ask you what do you think about the story, if it's worth selling. I mean, to be fair,
Molly, I'll get you.
yeah, honestly, you're one of the reasons why I signed up for this panel. I am currently also working on another feature-length screenplay and another documentary that I'm interested in making. But in general, I am focusing on writing and directing horror or thriller stories. And I think currently my main question is for everybody. Basically, the short script I wrote and got selected for this film festival, I am thinking if I should keep working on it as a script to make it a long feature film, or should I start working for it as a short film now? Because I really like the story. I want to keep developing it, but I'm not sure what kind of format will be the best step for this one. Some little background is currently I'm still studying at Syracuse University. I'm trying to get my MFA degree as well. Yeah.
Well, you have a lot going on. I will just say this. One of the things I was, when I was at the American Film Institute, one of the pieces of advice that we always got when we were creating our short films, and our features was to think of it as, even if I was writing a short film, how could it be a feature? And if I go ahead and make that short film or write the short film, think of it as the first act of your feature, right? And give it a false ending. So if there is a bigger idea in that, then work towards that, but use the short film format as a treatment, if you like, to make the first act of your feature, giving it a false ending, which means you also have another bit of a sales kind of sizzle thing for that feature when you write it. So that's something that we did on a particular project. It worked out quite well in that I worked with a director at the film school on creating a feature outline thread for it. And we took the first act of that once we'd done it, and that was the short film, right? So we can then we gave the short film a bit of a false ending, but it was easily transferable into a feature film, and we were able to use that as a sizzle reel. That's one way of going at it. It depends on the size of the idea, I guess. If it's, these days, what I'm involved in is it too big to be a feature? Oh, it must be a 6-episode TV series. What is that idea? And I don't think until you flesh it out completely through the process of creating a story and character biographies and the structure of the film itself, whether you'll be able to tell that. But that's something to consider as well, is my short film a way to, at least create the tone, world, and characters of that while I'm thinking about a bigger story.
Yeah, I think of a Saw. Remember Saw came out as a short, and that was pretty much just a proof of concept. And that obviously became very, very successful. Molly, without really knowing, the particulars of your story idea, it's hard to answer the question as to what you should do with this concept.
So for the short story, basically it's a girl struggling with her appearances. She go through different kind of methods, including plastic surgery, a DIY surgery, which is basically she performed herself at home, and eventually she found a permanent but very bodious solution. Spoiler alert, basically she decided to blind herself because in a way that means she doesn't need to see herself and she doesn't have to worry about herself like that. So this is also a story about facial dysmorphia. And originally I want to have a longer storyline because I wanted to have more revelation or more discussion about how what causes facial dysmorphia and more like illness or symptoms that will shows up in the story. But basically that's how the story premises is.
Yeah, it feels like if that were to be a feature film, that is certainly an independent movie, and you're certainly going to need a big star to take that lead role. But it's an interesting lead role, I would imagine. It actually asks a lot of questions in society and what have you. But I think it's possible that there could be something larger there. But it's kind of a tough one. It's a tough one. It might simply be that proof of concept to kind of showcase your directing abilities and your ability to make a film, whether that's a short film or not.
I guess this is also another question that I have because I'm not sure if it's still popular like among the markets and among the audience, like psychological thriller. Not the one that you also always see jump scares or very bloody as. I'm more thinking about storyline, maybe perhaps like Stanley Kubrick's Shining or Suspiria, like that. I'm just wondering if you guys think if there's still a market for this or it's a different kind of market right now.
There's a market for everything. Like the explosion of the streaming world has, the buyers are a lot. There's a lot more buyers for material, and that's why one of the reasons I left the studio was to get into the content providing game, because if you can work at certain budget levels, that Tubi has come out saying it's going to try and buy and make 100 movies a year. Whether they do that, I don't know. But it doesn't matter which genre you're working in. I believe Hulu is a very big purchaser of horror. Blumhouse, Jason Blum seems to have a deal with everybody. But again, independent horror, I think horror is a genre in general. If you wanted to go the psychological horror of that, I have a feeling your project there's going to be a little bit of gore in that. And I personally don't mind that. It's the reason I went to Screen Gems. I love horror. It's my thing, but I think that for that kind of material, the themes are very current and they're very, very present, and it's female driven, and it is dealing with those themes. And so I think that makes it it could be a little more successful than most. But again, you want to be thinking on the marketing side and where your film belongs, but stay true to the fact that that's the story you want to tell, especially as an indie producer.
Yeah, thank you for that, Steve. Yeah, that's a very interesting concept, and probably I'm going to have to
Can I
cut
just
you
have,
off,
like,
which
one
I
last
hate
question?
doing. I hate cutting people off, but we have so many more guests left, and I'm going to feel really guilty if we get to the end and someone only has 30 seconds because I was allowing everyone in the beginning to go on too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get through everyone, and if by some grace we end up with a little extra time, we'll do, third and fourth questions, just so I can make sure everyone gets enough time to talk about their project a little bit. So I'm going to go next to you, Julie, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're working on and the kinds of questions you have or feedback or advice that would be useful, something you feel like you're bumping up against that our industry guests here could be of help.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll speak very, very quickly. I know we're running out of time. I have a question, and it's a three-part question. So I want to just kind of get through all the information. Hopefully the three parts of the question will still be remembered. And the question is one of strategy, specifically starting with TV. I have two projects that are currently in development. One, it's epic in scope. I'll give you the log line quickly. The murdered wife of a young Black man in 1940s New York suddenly appears to him, forcing him to confront his demons, just as America is confronted with its own. We've already pitched a Bad Robot. I have one legendary actor attached to EP, direct a few episodes. an act. And then I also have a younger actor who's blowing up. He's on a Peacock series right now. So they're both attached. And so we're going the very traditional route because it's epic and scope. We've developed it. My creator and I basically had been in a little mini writer's room. So we're going the traditional route of a showrunner. Debbie Allen has looked at it. She recommended Shonda Rhimes. There's a lot of it. So we're confident in going that route, even though my co-creator and I are fairly unknown. But I also have a small comedy that's done really well now on the festival circuit. Now I'm wondering if that was a mistake. All IMDb qualifying festivals, but we did it ourselves. Incredibly low budget, and all the actors in it are working actors, but there's no names. And this one, here's the long line for this one. A woman in pest control meets an assassin / out of work actress / Etsy designer. And together with the Mice King, they take down the hardware elusive mafia hardware kings. It's absurd. Schitt's Creek meets Curb Your Enthusiasm. We have show rats. I did a play at the Geffen. Teller was my director, and I worked with show rats on stage. So I brought the show rats in. Absurd comedy. My question, and we've been offered places on smaller streamers like Tello Films, which is specifically lesbian and bisexual content. But our comedy's mainstream. We don't want to be necessarily pigeonholed with that. But I don't want to also give up complete creative control the way I am with The Trench Poet. That's my the World War II story that I just want to hold on to my creator title and be a writer in the room. So I'm open to selling that. Whereas with Tempakill, I want to stay involved. So I'm just wondering, should I still get a showrunner? Should I still look for other production companies to partner with and go that traditional route? Or I have a financing way that I think I can get this made, but it would be under $300,000. And is it pointless to stick this up on YouTube or Tubi or Tello, even though I know we could probably be seen for a creative Emmy? So that's my one question. Second question, same thing with films. I'm a writer on a film. It's called The Joy Division. We finally got our financing in Poland. There are problems in Poland. Poland is putting money into it. I have an Oscar award-winning producer attached to executive produce. $10 million budget. It was so difficult to get that money. And we're just now making offers. But I have two other films. One I was hired by James Franco to write. It's an adaptation of the Alex Marwood novel. It's called Knives Out, or excuse me, it's like Knives Out meets, it's very Hitchcock. And he got sued, and so we got the rights back to it. Again, it's about a $10 million budget. Should I go through that same path that I went through with Joy Division in trying to secure that 10 million, which apparently is one of the hardest budgets to get, or go through alternative financing and festivals and that sort of thing? I'm just wondering, strategy wise, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. And real quick, David, I think I know that organization you're talking about. I'm originally from Cincinnati, and I have a nonprofit in my younger sister's memory. She helped build my film company with me, and she died in pregnancy. And a part of our business plan, she was getting her MBA, was to, we had a philanthropic model within the business plan. And I used to practice law. I don't practice anymore. And so we put this together. And when she died, I took that philanthropic model and I created a charity called Foundation of Joy. And we work with artists and young adults in creating art to raise awareness and funds for the issues facing kids, homelessness, hunger, climate change, gender equality, all through art. And then we work with the nonprofits doing the daily work. I've met with Feeding America, Lonely Instruments for Needy Kids, Boys and Girls Club. So I just love what you're doing. I can't wait to see your documentary because art is a way to solve problems. So that's it. I'm done.
Well,
I wanted to be fast.
Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm for my project, and I think that it sounds like you've got a lot of exciting things going on. The funding situation is always a tricky thing, whether or not you're going to go for the gusto and find independent financing on a picture. As you found out, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of no's, a lot of false starts, a lot of, oh yeah, we have the money and then we don't. So that's a tough call to make. I think you can only make it for yourself based on your own experience. I think it sounds like your projects have merit and that there might be funding available for you. But what's the best way of getting funding. I turn it over to my to the other people on the panel, because there is no best way that I found. It's kind of you go to your sources that you can trust, and you try and repeat that with each new project.
Right. Do you think with the shows going to, I mean, is there success in making a low budget comedy and just putting it out there to the smaller streamers, or should I go the same route I'm going with my limited series that's huge, where we just, we're trying to get that in the hand, we're going to be pitching to Stars. As I said, we had a pitch to Bad Robot. They passed because it was too similar to Lovecraft Country. We have a lot of magical realism in it. So I'm just wondering, with every project, do I do the pitch deck? Do I put together that and then, have a manager go out there and pitch it? Or with like Tempakill, we're doing really well in the festival circuit, but then will it never see the light of day if I go with there's streamers everywhere now. But I feel like unless it's Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, is it a waste of time?
Julie,
whenever I hear like I don't want to give up creative control, like, oh, well, good luck.
Yeah. Well, I am with I'd like to be a part of it with Tempakill. With everything else, I know that I'm not going to maintain that. I'm fully aware.
No, I understand. And I think one of the things to think about, again, a lot of my experience is in feature film, not TV. I was a writer in TV. I do have a manager who takes out pilots every now and then that I will regurgitate, but I think what I've discovered is my manager always, tries to get them to showrunners. I don't want to be a showrunner because it's a horrible job. I'm not interested. They are basically CEOs of companies, and I'm a creative, and I like that part of it. But I think, you seem to be working in different genres, right? Mm-hmm. You will get pigeonholed at some point when you sell something. No one's going to hire you to write a horror thriller when you've just sold a comedy. It does happen. It does happen to bigger writers.
I do have a horror too, but we do have somebody pitching that for us.
But the thing to think about is that you do want to be attached to a showrunner, because they're the ones that will get you in the room and where financing will come from generally. So keeping that and keeping an idea that you might want to be a producer and writer on the show, and I don't see any problem with wanting that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Julie, I agree. I think that you definitely need some auspices attached to this thing. I think you need to go big especially on that comedy idea of yours. You'll spin your wheels forever trying to make this thing as a low budget, trying to find distribution for it. Mm-hmm. Unless you want to be up on YouTube, on your YouTube channel.
I don't.
You do. So be careful with the people that you're attaching, because sometimes you can think that somebody is meaningful, yet they're actually a hindrance because they're just not beloved like you thought they were across the board. So you're going to eliminate certain areas. So just be careful, but attaching or getting in business with a non-writing producer that is meaningful is certainly will be a big help to what you're doing there on the comedy.
Okay.
So for our last 3 attendees, I'm going to have to limit everyone, sadly, to about 5 minutes, because we're all going overtime and I'm being a really, really bad enforcer here. So try to say your question or a little bit about your project in a minute and a half. That way, because we do have so many wonderful industry guests, they all get a chance to jump in a little bit and offer their perspective on the feedback or bias or problems you're facing. I'm going to start with you. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. Sinise, you want to tell us your name so we can make sure I have it right?
No, you said it correctly. Thank you.
Oh, yay. Okay. All right.
Hi, everyone. So my sister, and I'm just going to be quick. My sister and I wrote these novels, 4 of them, and they're anthologies, and they're kind of like Black Mirror meets the Twilight Zone. Some of them there's romance, there's sci-fi, action adventures, and so forth. And from that, we translated them into scripts. And then some of them, and the cool thing about these stories is that they can be one-offs. They can be full features. They can run as a television series, which is what we wrote. There's also the Tales from the Crypt aspect of it, because there's a person and who tells the story of each of these. And so there's some background stuff going on in the background on the script. And the books aren't like that. They're just short anthologies. We did get to, just because we knew someone, get to initially work with a studio, but that was a non-start. There was things going on with that, and it's a new studio, so there was issues going on with that. And so my question is, it's hard to really get in front of people to try to pitch these stories, because we did pitch it to the COO and CFO, and we even have a draft budget for it. So it's kind of like, and I did take a couple of them and turn them into shorts. They're abstract shorts that I've submitted like to a couple of festivals. One of them did really well at a festival, but I guess I'm really at the basic level of just trying to be able to get in front of somebody to pitch. I've been told, oh, you need to get a literary agent. I've reached out to different literary agents, even the assistants, so to speak. But I guess the ones that were reaching out maybe weren't interested in that type of genre. Although the companies said that they did those type of things, anthologies to film. So they're quick in a nutshell.
Sure. Does anyone, maybe because I'm feeling very guilty about our last couple of people having so little time, does any one of our industry guests want to jump in and give some thoughts about finding good literary? Yes, Michael.
I'm just curious where you are with the process of getting the books themselves read and published. Is that
it's we're self-published, so they're
already published,
and we've already published them.
So you have IP. That's fantastic. That's a big thing. Anthology is super. I mean, I think everyone will agree that everything's tricky, but I think that anthology enters a new realm of tricky, because it has to have that hook. The Rod Serling invented the hook of talking to camera and introducing things, and then they had the Crypt Keeper and things. I don't know what your hook is, but I'm sure it's very good and very important to the cohesiveness of the stories so far. But it feels like building off of the books themselves is a huge step in the right, having that to show and to build off of is such a step in the right direction that I don't know, I'd kick it over to the other guys and see what the next step is, but that's a huge thing. That's a huge piece.
Yeah, I think that really depends on the kind of the sales figures on the books. These are self-published, Sinise?
Yeah, through Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
So if you could reference some sales figures that are big and that are meaningful, then that would certainly help you. That would create that IP that you can backstop on this particular project. It's super hard. I mean, anthologies are super hard. So it's a bit of a challenge. So if your long-term goal is just to simply sell these, that's one thing. But if you want to get on staff and write on a particular show and use some of this work and you can adapt it into, say, an hour format, and you can use it to actually build your career in television, and then therefore have a relationship with a studio that you've worked with, and that's a better way. I think it's a big challenge for you to do an anthology as an unknown writer with self-published books that you can't reference sales figures that are meaningful. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's a tough one. It's anthologies are tough. I've tried to sell a number of them, and I'm getting exactly what you're talking about here. So
yeah, we've transitioned some of them into feature length stories and feature length scripts. So just to give fill it with more background stories so that they could be standalone as well. And some of the stories are actually, they might, in volume 1 is one story, and then it continues to volume 2 is a continuation. So almost like building a saga, and you can take each of those stories and put it together and make it one whole book, which is one of the processes. So
thank you. Those are some really good ideas, Paul, about how to kind of like break up this content and maybe repurpose it a little and get interest in different ways. Well, my apologies to both you and Eric and Jim. My price that you've paid for me not wanting to cut people off is that you don't get a lot of time, but hopefully we can be really helpful to you. So, we've got about, 5 minutes left or so for each of you. So I'm going to ask you to really quickly introduce your project along with your main problem, and then I'll have to just have like 1 or 2 industry panelists weigh in really quickly. And I'm going to be aggressive about cutting off one of you to make sure that the last person does get a chance to speak at least a little bit. So Jim, you want to jump in and share what you're working on and what some advice would be helpful for you?
Sure. Hi. I'm a former journalist specialized in international affairs. So I write mostly crime or political thrillers, features with international settings. My main project is called Swiss Clean. It's a con movie. And the comps would be Ocean's 11 meets Zorro. I'm only a screenwriter. I have no ambition to be an actor or a director or a producer. So what I'm trying to do is I've got them in some of this, and been some success with the screenplays. And I do have Swiss Clean in front of a couple of Pat in front of a couple of execs. So I guess since I got to keep it really short, I guess my main question would be, since we're talking about festivals, etc. I think, and since I can't make these movies, or I can't, all I can do is try to sell it to people who can, that I think that maybe table reads might be the best way to try to get in front of a large audience. And I'd like to have your take on
that. So table reads for me are usually scripts that have already been purchased, or ones that are going to be made, ones that they're trying to develop a little further, and they're already attached actors. I'm not against that. A lot of my background is the theatre, so table reads are pretty common for me. I think it's a great way for a writer to hear dialogue and to hear their story out loud. Whether it's a good way to sell your script, probably not. It's not really a traditional route. I never say never to anything, to be honest, these days. It's a very eclectic industry. But table reads in general are probably more for a screenwriter to continue rewriting their work rather than sell it. To me, the only way to get a script out there is to make sure it's polished and is as best it can be. I always, just for anyone else, I always do a pitch deck with my work. I believe in creating a visual template of my script the way that I see it in my head. Not a 25 slide deck. Just no one wants to wade through that. Make it as visual as possible. So I would say a table read is interesting, but only for the screenwriter necessarily to listen to their script out loud. But yeah, just make sure that your script is as polished as possible, and then go those traditional routes because they still work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I can second that. I've seen pitch decks seem to be really compelling to people, and I know you emphasized you're mostly a writer, but sometimes also like very short, just little sizzle reels, just something very tiny can be compelling to some people, depending on the nature of the project and how much it can be condensed into something. But pitch decks are a wonderful sales tool, and sometimes people are reluctant to dive into a whole script. But as Steve was saying, like a short pitch deck can be a really compelling thing to grab attention. Eric, again, my apologies that you came last, but please jump in, tell us about your project and anything all our great panelists can help you on.
Okay, great. Yeah, no problem. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Eric Long, an emerging writer, director with over 31 screenwriting and shorts awards to my credit. Right now I'm working on writing Kako in a feature. It's a contained psychological mumblecore where a multiracial, two-spirit, indigenous queer millennial struggles to find his identity and survival trapped on a deserted island in the Pacific Northwest with his sexist, racist, homophobic, and estranged uncle and the evil spirit beast that's haunt it. I have financing for it and look forward to making it next spring or summer. I've also recently written 2 pilots, which unfortunately I don't think I have time to go into their log lines and everything like that. So I'll get more to my question, which is I'm basically looking to try to build my network and to connect with more people. Really like to get a job as a writer's assistant or script assistant or find some representation. And I'm just kind of looking for any ideas on how to preserve an entry position in writing and how to kind of build that network out.
That's a great question.
I like that question, actually. That's very pointed, very direct. Eric, becoming a writer's assistant is, I mean, what is the goal? Is the goal to write in television?
Yeah, that would be my goal.
You've got a lot going on right now. There's a lot there. But your goal is to write into television. So, you know, gosh, to become a writer's assistant, boy, that's such a kind of an incestuous way in. People are a lot of times are hiring just by way of recommendations from either agents, managers, or other executive producers out there that they trust, or other producers or writers that they trust to give them people. I would suggest trying to find a common denominator with showrunners that are in the area that you feel you excel in. And what I mean by that is whether you went to a particular school or you're in a particular fraternity or sorority, not sorority for you, I would imagine, but you know what I mean, trying to find some common denominator with somebody and use that information to try to make a connection. It's hard, it's certainly very hard. The material, you'll have to, nobody wants to hire a showrunner's assistant or a writer's assistant, who automatically is expecting to get on a show, in the first year or so. They want to kind of, showrunners will hire and that's kind of the best way in to be a writer on staff somewhere, is to be an executive producer's assistant or a writer's assistant, because they'll end up knowing how that showrunner works, and it's not like you're training somebody new. How do you get to that position is really what you're asking here, and boy, you need to utilize all your contacts and try to be as creative as you can to get to showrunners out there, whether that's with getting management representation, agency representation, just favors that you can ask upon people if you start developing relationships with agents and or managers or assistants. Having assistants, we talked about this before, read your material and make recommendations to people. I mean, you got to go all hands on deck. I mean, it's really, really difficult. And I'm going to be quite honest with you in that. If you don't have a diverse background, it's even harder.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I agree with everything Paul said. There's no way someone like me could staff on a show anymore, to be honest with you. I probably could, but I'd have to create my own show. I think everything Paul said is correct. You have to have good samples. Your writing samples have to be hot, so that when you do reach out to these people, one of the first things someone who wants a writer's assistant is going to want to know is if you can write. It's as simple as that. It is very incestuous and nepotistic in the industry. A lot of people end up with those jobs who already have relationships. So for you, it's about finding out, how do I build relationships? You will see on Deadline Hollywood, or deadline.com it's called now, and a lot of those industry trade magazines, that new projects are being announced every day. And so reaching out to the production companies or people who are making those projects and putting yourself out there and saying, I'm looking for a writer's assistant job, I have these hot samples, that's something you can do. And also become members of tracking boards. Generally they're very closed. You can only get invited to most of those, but there are places like trackingb.com and all of those places where you can look at, they're a little more commercial, a little more public, where you can meet people through those social media. There's another company called, I think someone mentioned Stage 32 or something. I'm not sure what they're like. I'm not going to recommend them, to be honest with you. But a lot of those writing boards have social media outlets now where you can reach out to people and find out what's going on. So that would be my recommendation. It's not easy to get that kind of work now. But there are a lot of production companies who are always looking for interns, and you can start there. It's not paid very well, but starting at the bottom and making yourself useful and having good samples is probably the best you can do. And being on the ground with that, with looking at those tracking boards and trade magazines, and do your research on who's making what and who's making what you're making, and just query the assistants and say, hey, I'm looking for an internship. Or I'm looking to be a writer's assistant. How would I do that? The most they can say is no.
Thank you so much, Steve.
One more thing, Eric, one more bit of advice. Don't necessarily think about the showrunners, think about the line producers as well. Line producers are in charge of budgeting. and they have the ear of the executive producers. So think line producers as well, because that could be a good way in too. Or any other writing producer on any other level.
Well, I hate to end this. We're actually over time, and I have to sign off. Everyone here has been amazing. People ask such thoughtful and really inspiring questions, and our industry panelists were just so generous and personal in their answers. I really enjoyed this and appreciate it. And I wish we could stay here another hour and really dive into things. But it's been great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.